Hello and good afternoon, everyone. We're still waiting on some more people who registered to show up, but we will get things rolling here. Welcome back to the webinar series for the Bridge to Land, Water, Sky Living Labs project. My name is Lydia. I work on the Bridge Communications team, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. As we continue our path to building respectful relationships, we would like to begin with a call to gather, drumming and singing by Muskeg Lake Cree Nation to appreciate the cultural practices of the Indigenous partners working with us on this project. The drum is considered an essential connection to the natural world, and together, drumming and singing are essential elements that help maintain Indigenous identity and cultural heritage. So before we get going into the webinar, we've just got a couple little housekeeping things to go through. So I don't think that you have an option, but please keep your microphone muted throughout the webinar. Just a heads up that this webinar is being recorded, and we have closed captions available on the toolbar button that should be at the bottom of your screen. Please leave any questions that you might have in the Q&A section at any point throughout the webinar, and at the end of the presentation, any questions will be addressed with our presenter. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, so we don't actually have a chat available to us right now. But if any other buttons are unavailable for you that you think should be available, click on More to access them. And again, that should be at the bottom of your screen there. Perfect. So in our webinar today, we have Dr. Shathi Akhter, and she's going to be taking a closer look at how trees can play a practical role on farm operations. So that includes improving soil, supporting biodiversity, and managing challenging spots in the field. Drawing on insights from 4 different AAFC projects, Shathi will explore strategies like planting trees along field edges, enhancing wetlands with riparian vegetation, integrating trees with pasture, and intercropping hazelnuts and berries with other crops. Dr. Akhter is a research scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and she leads the Agro-Ecosystems program at the Indian Head Research Farm. Her work focuses on improving agricultural practices to enhance productivity, biodiversity, and ecosystem health. She is also a co-lead on the Central Prairie with SODCAP, AAFC Living Lab project, and she collaborates with Indigenous partners to promote sustainable land management. Dr. Akhter holds a PhD in biology and environmental sustainability, as well as multiple master's degrees in related fields, bringing interdisciplinary expertise to advancing climate-resilient farming practices. And I am now very excited to give a warm welcome to Shathi. Take it away.
Thank you, Lydia. Let me share my slides. Can you see my slides, Lydia?
Yep, you're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you again. First of all, I would like to start my presentation with some land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I live and work on Treaty 4 land, the traditional lands of the Cree, Sultax, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota peoples, and the homeland of the natives. Today, I'm honored to be invited to the Bridge to Land and Water Sky Living Lab. And also, it is a privilege to share this virtual space with you and having this, I'm seeing this more of a conversation after my presentation, and that is grounded in our mutual respect and also shared interest for the land, water, and sky. As we begin this presentation, I would like us to take a moment to think about our prairie land. Is it just a farmland or just a pasture land? Or it is actually a living ecosystem shaped by thousands of years of relationships between land, water, people, and everything between land and water, and our relationship with each other. Today, we're standing on a very critical moment in the prairie. We're losing our grasslands, our wetlands are disappearing, and in Saskatchewan alone, we lost almost 2,500 kilometers of shelter belt. These losses are not just ecological facts. They're transitioning into reduced resilience for our crops, our water systems, our wildlife, and our communities. In my work, I have the privilege to meet with many landowners, farmers, Indigenous colleagues, and colleagues in my science community. And one thing I noticed that many of them are leading conversations about how to respond to these challenges and how can respond to these challenges in a way that is culturally aligned, ecologically sound, and future focused. One question always comes is that how we can work with the land, not against it, to build the resilience of this land. And to answer this question, trees come again and again. It's not only the shelter belts that we planted or the natural trees that stand or the role that they play to protect our land and water. These trees are also deeply connected to the food security, cultural values, and community well-being. So today when I'm talking about roots to revenue, I'm looking into sharing me and my team's work on how this tree-based system can bring ecological benefits and economic opportunities together in a way that honor both traditional knowledge and the scientific research we're doing. So at AFC, I'm leading an interdisciplinary program, Agri-Ecosystem Resilience. And in this program, I'm looking into not only one particular tree system, but rather a suite of interconnected tree-based solutions that together build resilience across farm, watershed, and communities. We're working with natural trees standing in our agricultural land, planted trees that we planted for centuries, tree-based intercropping system, integrating different food-based trees, also trees integrating in a pasture system, silk pasture with livestock, and also trees that plays a role for our water bodies. Each of these systems serve a different purpose. Some protect the soil and land and crops from wind, from erosion. Some enhance biodiversity. Some store significant amount of carbon. And others support food sovereignty and revenue generation. But what ties them all together is that they all contribute to healthier land and more resilient prairie agriculture, something that farmer, landowner, and researcher like me, we all care about deeply. So let's start with the natural trees that we have in our agricultural land. As you drive by or walk in the prairie, you must have noticed all this natural aspen blast that we have. Just looks like sometimes islands in our agricultural lands. We don't know much about these areas. We have done quite a good amount of work for the trees that we planted. But as of now, these areas are mostly unknown. Sometimes we go there and cut woods for firewood or go for hunting, limited uses for this land. But we haven't actually quantified the services that these areas could provide. They cover roughly 10% of our agricultural landscape. And what we now know that they can store up to 90% of more carbon than the planted trees could do. They offer numerous ecological values that we did not quantify yet: protecting soil, moderating moisture, supporting wildlife. But until recently, they are almost entirely invisible in our national data set. And the challenge is because we could not estimate their values yet. There has never been any acceptable method to measure these aspen trees, their height or diameter, their biomass, how much carbon they store, what values they provide. There's some traditional way that we could try to do, going there and measuring these trees. But as we know that is time consuming, slow and expensive, and practically impractical for landowner producer who might want to monitor their land. And this gap has real consequences. If we cannot measure something, then we cannot actually value them properly. So this slide introduced the heart of our work, bringing visibility to this natural tree system, to their contributions to resilience, carbon storage, their role in land productivity, biodiversity, etc. And when we can measure them properly, we can actually give them a place in the conversation about prairie sustainability. So I'm showing the Saskatchewan map here, showing different soil regions, starting from the black to dark brown and brown soil zone. And the white dots are representing a few sites that we looked into these natural trees. We have 2 sites in the black soil and 2 in the dark brown, and 1 in the brown soil close to Swift Current area. And for this work, I got partnership with Dr. Colin Larrock at the University of Saskatchewan. Colin is also collaborating on the Bridge to the Land and Water Sky Living Lab project. So I'm not sure if Colin is joining today. If you are, it has been a privilege to work with you on this project and bringing a master's student together. So Colin and I brought a master's student all the way from Bangladesh, Runa. She looked into these natural trees. And in her master's work, you can see Runa's picture on the bottom left, she addressed 2 big challenges. First, she needed to find a stable and accurate way to measure tree height using unmanned aerial vehicle attached to a LiDAR camera. What LiDAR does is that it measures the height for the structures. And using the LiDAR attached unmanned aerial vehicle or drones, she tested pixel size from 5 centimeter to 100 centimeter and found that 40 centimeter is the sweet spot. And at this resolution, it is fine enough to capture the tree canopy, but coarse enough to avoid the noise. And the second challenge she looked into in her master's work was diameter estimation for the trees, because diameter is really important when it comes to measuring the biomass of the trees. And until now, all LiDAR-based diameter methods required on-the-ground observation, which is, again, with the purpose. So Runa developed a site-independent approach in her master's thesis, meaning that it works across different soil zone and different types of tree vegetation structure and condition. So in her work, she developed a model that captured close to 70% of stems and predicted diameter with, I would say, good accuracy, that we can start looking into building on that work. So in this slide, I'm showing you some of the results that we have captured in her master's work. On the figure here, the blue bars are showing the on-the-field observation data that she measured individually the trees, both diameter and height. And the orange bar is showing her LiDAR images attached to the unmanned aerial vehicle data. And the green bar is LiDAR attached to a plane from much higher in the sky with 100 centimeter resolution. What she found is that the data that she collected with unmanned aerial vehicle is pretty close to the field observation, except the brown soil site. And keeping in mind that Luna only had one site in the brown soil zone, so very limited data, we're going to continue looking into that with bringing more site and more measurements to do more fine-tune that soil zone. However, these methods give us, for the first time, a practical pathway to estimate carbon in these natural aspen trees across Saskatchewan. This work is also important for the landowners and farmers who often have these natural aspen trees in their land and may one day be able to actually recognize, receive recognition or compensation for the carbon those trees store. So I would say Runa's thesis is not just academic. It lays the methodological foundation for real-world carbon accounting and future policy, if we would like to. So from the natural trees, I'll now move into the planted trees, the shelter belts. Compared to the natural trees, we know quite a bit about the shelter belts because literally we measured every shelter belt in Saskatchewan in the past between Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and University of Saskatchewan, our two institutions work. We know how much carbon this shelter belt is storing in Saskatchewan and how much we're losing each year, how much is left. But one thing is that this work is very much restricted to Saskatchewan because there is a limitation to scale up this to the rest of the prairies and nationally in other parts of Canada because we do not have a fast and effective method of measuring tree biomass again. So this is where Stephanie comes in. Stephanie is a master's student at the University of Regina working with myself and Dr. Mark van der Waal. So she took a remote sensing approach to measure these trees using unmanned aerial vehicles to capture high resolution images and then measuring biomass from those trees. So some image from Stephanie's fieldwork. Again, just like Runa, Stephanie also looked into black, dark brown, and brown soil zone, capturing a huge landscape, agricultural landscape base in Saskatchewan. So some of the hard side was close to Indian Head, while other were Francis and Weyburn area in the south. And then she spent quite a good amount of time in Saskatchewan, in Swift Current area to capture the brown soil zone. In her work, Stephanie developed two different biomass prediction models, one with, again, unmanned aerial vehicle with taking fine high resolution images from 45 meters above the ground. And another one was using airborne LiDAR-based high resolution digital elevation model data, which we have quite a good amount of coverage in Saskatchewan. And across all models, she found that shoulder belt volume came up as one of the strongest predictor for biomass. And when she added a contrast, a measure of canopy structure for the trees, it improved the prediction values, especially for the HRDM data. The important contribution that Stephanie did in her master's work is that we now, for the first time, we have a remote sensing based shelterable biomass map for Saskatchewan. And on the picture here, you can see some of her prediction values for our unmanned aerial vehicle based data site. It's close to 0.44 and better than HRDM data sets. So let's say that now we have a remote sensing based biomass prediction model for Saskatchewan, which I'm showing here on the right. A few things came up in her thesis is that among all the species for shelter belts that we have in Saskatchewan, shrubs and deciduous, they store close to 90% of shelterable carbon compared to conifers and mixed. So that doesn't mean that the coniferous species like spruce or Scots pines are less value, because we need to keep in mind that other than storing carbon, trees does much more other types of work. For example, providing habitat for biodiversity, which I'll be talking shortly. And another thing is that Stephanie noticed that biomass increased from the drier southeast to wetter northeast part. And again, her work will bring lots of values in scaling up this shelter belt carbon estimation or biomass prediction for rest of Canada. And it is important for climate program, incentive design, and national carbon accounting, and also for landowners, because it means that we can finally quantify and recognize the carbon that already present in the shelter belts in individual farms. So now that I spoke about carbon, now I would like to focus more on the ecological services that the trees that we have in our agricultural land provide other than the carbon value. Particularly, I'll be talking about, again, shelter belts and natural trees, mostly the one that we see on the field edge, and what impact those trees have on our crop production. Oftentimes, our landowners and producers see these areas as non-productive area because those are the areas that we are actively not growing the crops. Those are set-aside land. And there's some concern that those areas could harbor the weeds or the pest population and potential ill laws for the age effect. But we also have to keep in mind that these areas offer many ecological benefits as well. They're excellent habitat for pollinators and other beneficial insects. They provide the microclimate benefit to the area adjacent to these areas where the crops are growing in terms of moisture retention, shade, etc. Also soil stabilization, biodiversity support. There is a reason that we planted these trees in this land because in the past, we had severe issues about soil erosion, strong wind, all those things. And one question we're asking in this project is that how far does this benefit or risk from these tree-based ages extend into the crop field? And what we have been running this project for quite a few years now. And from our data set, we can confidently say that we're not seeing much soil microbial diversity effect between the different types of land base that we are examining, between shelter belt or natural hedgerows, as we compare those with the field that does not have any age. But we do notice a microbial community composition that differ between the different types of field that we study. So I'm talking here about beneficial microbes in terms of their functional characterization, in terms of like how they help integrating soil nutrients and makes it available for the crops. Where we are seeing a very strong differences is when it comes to how these areas are affecting the bees population, both native and honeybees, wasps like parasitors, beneficial insects like crabbits, ground beetle. We are particularly working a lot with this crabbit ground beetle. They are the natural predator. I have a picture here on this figure. They feed on harmful pests and insects like maggots, those aphids, caterpillars. And when they get hungry, they eat anything, flea beetle, and even the weed seeds. So we are saying a good population of these beneficial insects in the areas that we have natural hedgerows and shelter belts compared to the open field. So on this bar here, so you can see that the crabbits ground beetles population is much higher in the fields that has native field edges. Shelter belts are much simpler tree areas and much narrower. It's not surprising that we are seeing less population there. The impact is also noticeable when it comes to the bird species. We have collected 3 years of data with field observation, working in the field, and then we have 2 to 3 years of also data that we collected using automated recording unit. And in both collection, we noticed that fields with natural vegetation or with shelter belts have not necessarily always more birds, but again, it's the types of birds we have. We identified more birds diversity in fields with trees compared to the open field areas. And also like to mention here that in some of the field, we also spotted birds that are in more threatened and species at risk categories. So that's the good news. When it comes to the wheat, we see that the seed banks differ between the boundary age and within the crop field. And one thing we found that the field boundaries actually did not contribute in any wheat encroachment into the field. So that's another good news. So besides these ecological things, farmers often also would like to know about yield, like how much yield we are losing, or like are the age effects is causing yield reduction to the field. So before talking about that, I'd like to bring your attention to this figure, cartoon figure here on the middle of the slide. So here we are showing where there are shelter belts, and here in this case, you're seeing a 5-row multi-species shelter belt. When wind comes, these shelter belts kind of change the wind direction. This goes up and then creates a bell curve. And within this bell curve, this is the area where we see the impact of the trees, where the microclimates got modified, or where the crops get protection from the strong wind. Or wintertime, we see huge snow accumulation that slowly in the summer month help with moisture availability for the crops. So from the long-term data in the literature or in our study, we see a similar bell-shaped pattern in terms of the yield. So right beside the age, we do see some yield loss up to 10 to 15 meters. But then we see a good, huge bump in the yield production. And then until it gets flattened more on the right side. So the shelter belts, depending on the height and species, does bring some good benefit to our crops that we are growing in Saskatchewan. And we also looked into some of the quality for the crops in terms of the oil content for canola, and we saw a similar pattern there as well. Another picture I'd like to show here is that it's the NDVI image that my colleague Kim Hodge, he flew drones and captured NDVI. As you can see that more green close to the shelter belt area. And as you go more inside the field up to 500 meters, we see that it's getting more yellow and red. So NDVI kind of shows the greenness of the field or the or crop quality. So when we overlay with the yield data, actual observation from the field, again, we see the similar trend that higher yield close to the shelter belt. As we go away from the field, we are seeing it's getting less and less. So now, after talking about crop yield, I would like to bring your focus to more on the pasture field for our livestock side of the story. And also to show you that trees not only perform on the field edge, but there are ways to integrate them within the field as well, both crop and pasture. Particularly in the next few slides, I'll be focusing on the pasture areas with livestock. For a generation in Saskatchewan in the prairie, cattle have grazed in open pasture. But historically, this landscape weren't completely open. Wooded acres provided shade, forage diversity, and habitat for wildlife. And in silvopasture concept, it is actually bringing those relationships back to the field, integrating trees, forage, and livestock all into a single system. It is not a new system globally, but we haven't done much work in Canada. We have done some limited work in BC in a more restricted silvopasture way. However, it is becoming an emerging conversation in the prairie, and a critical one as our climate becomes hotter, drier, and more vulnerable. So before showing our silvopasture work in Saskatchewan, I would like to walk you through some silvopasture potentials number in Canada. The Canadian beef sector produces about 23 million tons of greenhouse gases every year. And oftentimes, our livestock producer get the attention about enteric methane emission and global warming from those areas of conversation in different avenues. However, our modeling showed that silvopasture could mitigate up to 12% of those emissions. And that's only considering if we keep 10% of areas in the farm set aside for silvopasture, not the entire area. And also, I'm not talking about planting trees in native grassland, those types of areas. Absolutely not, because by planting trees in native grassland, we'll actually do more harm than any good. So I'm focusing on more tame and seeded pasture areas. And second thing is that Canada has 21 million hectares of land used for forage and pasture. And currently only 5% has any form of tree livestock system. So this means that there is enormous potential, especially here in Saskatchewan, where heat events are becoming more and more intense and more frequent. Shade reduces livestock heat stress, which directly linked to the livestock weight gain. So now what we are doing in Saskatchewan in terms of silvopasture research in our program. So on the map here, I'm showing two locations where we have two project sites, one in the black soil, one in the dark brown. No, one in the black soil. Sorry, I'm losing my thought here. Yeah, in Kellyher region, and another one in dark brown area in Candle pasture. That is a partnership with the Creator Cattle Nakota Nation, the Candle site. And these projects were co-developed from the time I was writing the project proposal to now that we are carrying on the project. And the Candle site was a pasture that was seeded mostly 25 to 30 years before. At the present, before we started the project, it was in a very degraded stage. The productivity was extremely low, huge amount of weed infestation in the field. And Kellyher site is in a much better shape compared to the Candle. But again, it was seeded quite few years before and needed some level of rejuvenation. So what we did is that in both sites, we rejuvenated the pasture with some native seed and also added some legumes. It was a bit challenging to establish those sites, particularly with the native grasses in the Candle site. But after a few attempts of trial and error, we figured out, and we actually got really good results, as you can see in the middle site, good forage production. And Candle site is owned by Creator Cattle, but rented to Dennis Kress, a farmer who is living right beside the farm. In this picture, you can see Dennis here. And Kellyher site is a partnership with Town of Kellyher and also a collaboration with Digoer Farm. So Digoer Farm is renting the land from the Kellyher town. So we are collecting data. We already started collecting data from this site in terms of biomass production, in terms of soil nutrients, greenhouse gas sample collection, and all of those biodiversity. And there are a few things I'd like to bring your attention here. The trees are only 2 years old, so they're still small. But what we noticed that in the second year, the birds already started building nest. And you can see that on a bur oak seedling, the tree nest that I captured this year. Another thing is on this picture, look at the biomass, please. So I mentioned that we are seeing that good forage production following the second year after we did the seeding. We actually have a student here who is collecting biomass, and as you can see that the tall grass and dense grass could barely let you see the student there. And third, what I like to show here is that we integrated goats in the Candle site this year. And the reason is that in this picture, you can see how much absinthe we have on this site. So huge weed pressure. And although we intended to have cows down the road when the trees are bigger, we cannot bring them as of yet because we need some years to establish the seedling. So we thought goats would be a good option. So the farmer who is renting the land from Creator Cattle, he had goats, so that came handy. And his boy also agreed to work as a shepherd for us. And it actually turned out pretty good. From our observation this year, we noticed that goats did a pretty good job in cleaning some of those absinthe, and particularly the female goats. They didn't mind at all to eat the absinthe, while male goats, they showed some preference of not eating them unless they're absolutely hungry. And so why silvopasture and this type of practice matters for Saskatchewan? And as I mentioned in my previous slide, this system has a potential to reduce 12% of greenhouse gas emissions from the livestock industry. Also, the shed reduced livestock heat stress and improved weight gain, improved forage production that we already started seeing just in the second year of the project. As the trees grows bigger and bigger, we expect to see that the forage production would continue to be on the good side. Long-term carbon storage in the trees and soil, and also it is a network between landowners, researchers like us, stakeholders, and right holders. On the picture, you could see from the height perspective, in 2 years, the bur oak is growing beautifully, and also other species like larch or poplars, pines that we are growing. From the silvopasture, now I would like to bring more on the food side of the story, how trees are getting used in our program in food production. On the tree intercropping project, what we are doing here is that we are integrating fruit trees like berries, nuts in annual crop or forage fields. And the goal is that in the initial year of the plantation, we'll only get economic return from the annual crops or perennial crops or the forage that we are growing in between the tree rows. But as trees get established and start bearing fruit, bearing fruits or nuts, we will see much more higher return per unit area of land. Also, just like shelter balls, these fruit trees, also, although they are low in height, they will still contribute to improving the microclimate, enhancing the biodiversity. We are seeing huge biodiversity presence in our fields in terms of deer presence or birds, pollinators. And also, again, I always value the partnership that we are developing through these projects with our various stakeholders and right holders. So for tree intercropping project, we have 3 project sites in Saskatchewan. We have few other project sites in other parts of Canada, but for this presentation, I'm only focusing on Saskatchewan site. Again, we have one site in black soil right in the Indian Heritage Reserve Farm. We have another site in the Darburn area in Candle with partnership with Carry the Cattle. It is the same piece of land that we partnered up with Carry the Cattle for both silvopasture and tree intercropping project. And another one in more on the southern part of the province in McCord with Gavlin Farm. And in these 3 sites, we are approaching the project in 3 different ways based on the landowner and the partner's interest and what they would like to see. In Indian Head site, we have tree intercropping with cinnamon, buffaloberry, and hazelnut with the annual and legume intercrops. So we have alfalfa and also wheat, canola, and peas in rotation. And on the Carry the Cattle pasture side, we took more of a food sovereignty approach. We sat with the elders and looked into their interest in what they would like to go in that land. So we planted the buffalo berries and Saskatoon and a few apple trees in that land. And that is a pasture land. So we haven't rejuvenated intercropping piece of pasture land yet. We are seeing how the current forage is doing in the next couple of years. And if needed, we will most likely rejuvenate that as well. And the third intercropping project site in McCord with Gavlin Farm. Our partner, Calvin and Marla, they were interested in the hazelnut trees. And later on, they also showed interest to integrate some fruit trees in terms of Saskatoon that they really does well in their part of the province. So we planted Saskatoon and hazelnut in their land. And Calvin plans to plant perennial polycrop that would be used for either baling or down the road, once the tree is established, grazing the piece. Again, all these sites all led with close conversation with the partners and based on their interest. And also, from the 3 different rich soil regions, the sites will give us an opportunity to test how this approach is working in different soil zones. And we are measuring quite a few things in these different field sites. So we're looking into carbon, both in the trees and soil. We are measuring greenhouse gases. We started with nitrous oxide emission measurement this year. Down the road, as we plan to integrate livestock, we'll also look into the methane emission. Biodiversity, looking into pollinators, soil microbes, and other beneficial insects. Nutrients, we did baseline soil measurement for carbon and other nutrients before we start the project, and we are monitoring as the year progresses. Obviously, we'll be looking into yield for both annual crops as well as the fruit and nut tree and shrubs, and also the strong partnership that we are growing. So all these pictures that you see here are from the Indian Head project site. And Sibapthar and Buffalo Berry site in Indian Head, it started quite a few years before. As you can see that the trees are already established, and we started collecting meaningful data already. But for the hazelnut site for Indian Head, we just started that 2 years now. Some pictures that are capturing our partnership with Creator Cattle. As I mentioned, we started the project with meeting with the elders and brought their knowledge in developing the project. They also joined us in every aspect of the project, starting from the tree planting. Here you can see our colleague and councillor, Trina Belgrade. She's planting the Saskatoon trees at the Kendall pasture site. Elder Karen also came when we did the soil sampling to see how we are doing it, how deep we are doing. And you can see as we are soil sampling how degraded the pasture is. And in one of the meetings, she also actually brought her pink shirt that reminded us of the famous quote from the Sitting Bull. Let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. I think that's the shared goal and vision that captures what we are looking into in this project by working together and learning from each other. And I could not but help to show some of the site establishment picture as well for 2 reasons. I am presenting all this data today, but all the hard work is done by the experienced technician and all the students that we hire who does this hard work in establishing the site, maintaining and taking care of them. And also, as we plant hundreds and thousands of trees per year, as you can see that we try to do it as much mechanized way as possible. We use tree planter, tractors, and also we use plastic mulch to reduce some of the competition from the weed and also retain soil moisture. So from the tree intercropping project, I'll now jump into the other areas in the farm that oftentimes gets ignored or neglected. Those are those low spots in our agricultural farmland, those farm level wetlands. As we see that more and more often, these low spots or wetlands are getting drained, or if it's a dry year, simply cropped through. But I would call them as like the ecological heartbeat or the hottest spot in our farmland, because those areas does a tremendous job in holding moisture, dissipating moisture in summer months, holding the snow in the winter months, and as spring snow melt occurs, it holds the moisture into the bucket instead of letting it run off to our lakes and stream and causing the water quality issues. So in this project, we are looking at quite a few different things. What are the impact of these wetlands on the surrounding land yield, biodiversity, nutrients, greenhouse gas emissions, and soil health from the microbial perspective? But we're also looking at how we can manage this land. And one of the approach we took is, can we plant fast-growing trees like willows to create a buffer zone between the land and these areas so that those willows can actually capture some of the nutrient runoff from the field. And instead of letting those nutrients go to the water body, putting that into the biomass. So in this project, we are looking into 54 wetlands across Saskatchewan. It's a very busy project, kept us driving and running around the province throughout the summer month. Those sites are also from black, dark brown, and brown soil zone. And in these 54 different types of wetlands, we looked into annual crop fields, also the pasture, tame and seeded pasture, as well as native rangeland. Because in our observation, we see that many of the wetlands we are losing them more in the annual crop field compared to when it comes to pasture or native grasslands. So while I don't have much time today to walk through the details of this project and observation, I'd like to show you some of the site pictures. When we planted the trees, we again used a plastic mulch and used widow cutting to start the site, and we maintained. In second year, you see this is the growth that happens. If the site is not get heavily damaged by wildlife, that's one of the challenges we faced, and we actually lost site that could not establish due to huge wildlife pressure, whether it is a rabbit or deer. But when the sites gets lucky to avoid those issues, in 2 years, we see huge amount of growth, and also lots of branching occurs. And in 4 years, as you can see that this picture is taken this summer, they gained quite a bit of height, and I think 8 to 10 foot tall, one of the site in the Francis area. And also I'd like to acknowledge that all these lands we are working on producer land and working alongside them. In this picture, you can see Rick and Colette Stushnov, close to Indian Head. We are working in one of their seeded pasture field, just right behind them here. It's a big pasture, big wetland. So after talking about these 4 different projects and different types of tree integration that we are working on this land, we would like to bring your attention about how bringing all this together. And this is a busy slide I'm presenting here. I apologize for the very small font, but I could not resist to grab your attention in a few things that I'd like to show you on this slide. So this is a study that we published a couple of years before, where we looked into 4 different sectors in Canada: forests, agriculture, grasslands, and wetlands. In these 4 different sectors, we looked into quite a few different beneficial management practices that we currently practice in Canada. So we looked into the Canada's mitigation potential opportunity in these 4 sectors, and we found that altogether, they have the potential of 78 megaton carbon dioxide equivalent per year of greenhouse gas emission when we target 2030. But from these 78 megaton of carbon dioxide, if you see which sector is doing the most contribution, it's the agriculture. The number is 37.4 megaton carbon dioxide equivalent per year, which surpass all the other 3 sectors that we have, the big time, like 37 versus 11, 13, and 15. So it tells us that agriculture has huge potential when it comes to climate mitigation opportunities in Canada. Second thing I'd like to show here is that under each sector, we have all these different BMPs. For agriculture, cover crop, biochar, nutrient management, tree intercropping, manure, silvopasture, and a few others are here. And not all the BMPs are equally cheap or expensive to establish. For example, when it comes to biochar, it has huge potential for climate mitigation. So you can see that bar is quite high here. However, if you look into that, this bar is a light gray, which is like $100 per gram of carbon that it can sequester. Compared to, if I bring your attention to silvopasture, solid black, representing $10. So while silvopasture does not have much establishment and maintenance costs, but providing the potential for climate mitigation, some other BMPs could be expensive. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing is that you see all these different color-coded bars that we have on each BMP for beneficial management practices. Again, if you look into biochar, it has the potential to help to providing co-benefits for soil and water. When I compare that again with silvopasture or shelter belts here, we see all 5 colored bar here. That means they are providing co-benefits for air, biodiversity, soil, water, social, all of this. So these are the quite a few things that I wanted to bring your attention on this slide. Although it is busy slide, but it is actually really the heart of the message that I'm trying to tell here. In Canada, if we really want to meet the climate mitigation goal, the agricultural land hold some of the most powerful, achievable, and cost-effective opportunities compared to other sectors. Now, all these ecological benefits are good, but as a landowner and producer, as I talk to them, one thing I noticed in the last couple of years is that adoption of some of these practices in the land will not be achievable unless these ecological practices also bring a balanced approach when it comes to the generating income from those farms. And the evidence is clear. Across the prairies, trees consistently paying back if we know how to look at them. Shelter belt can increase fieldage yields from 6 to 15%, depending on which crop you're talking about, what types of shelter belts, whether it is a tall shelter belt versus it is a short shelter belt like Caragana. Same is true with the aspen bluff. They are storing immense amount of carbon, 80 to 150 tons of carbon per hectare stored in our aspen parkland, natural trees. Silvopasture also bring huge potential. We're noticing 5 to 12% of cattle weight gain during heat, and that's based on Saskatchewan trials. And also from the fruit and nut tree-based intercropping system, there is also potentials for revenue generation there. So when we talk about integrating trees into agriculture, it's not only about ecological restoration or climate action, although those are also critical, I would say. It's also about creating practical and measurable revenue opportunities that fit the prairie landscape and support the landowners. So this is the last slide that I would like to talk today. And from my presentation, I hope one message stand out clearly. Trees are not competing with agriculture. Rather, they are making it much stronger, whether through yield stability, shade for the livestock, healthier soil, or new food or revenue opportunities. Trees turn landscape stability into long-term profitability. What we see from the evidence is that revenue comes in many forms. Some come as direct, like berries, nuts, or tree biomass that can return thousands of dollars per hectare each year. But some are protective, like 1 to 3% whole field gain that comes from reducing the pressure from the wind stress or protecting from the drought. Some of the revenue come more quietly and flows through the land. And those are in the form of cleaner water, more carbon stored in the soil, stronger biodiversity, which also worth good amount of revenue. So across the prairie, producers, indigenous colleagues, researchers like myself, policy leader, we all are seeing the same thing. Perhaps resilience is becoming our most valuable crop as we are dealing with some of the climate vulnerability in our lands. When we invest in the health of the land gives us back economically, ecologically, and also not to forget culturally. So my final thought is when trees support the land support the farm. And when we build this system all together, rooted in deep science, guided by lived experience and traditional knowledge, and strengthen partnership, we create prairie landscape that can thrive for generations. So with that, I'd like to thank you everyone for your attention, and also thank you for the work that you are doing in your role to caring for this very land.
That was really, really great. What an informative presentation. Thank you so much, Sati. We really appreciate that you were here to share your knowledge and expertise with us today. For everybody else, tuned in here. Before we get started with the Q&A session, we just want to ask that you could maybe complete a brief survey that we put together just to help us understand your thoughts at the end of this webinar. So on your screen, you should see there's a QR code in the top right there. If you would be so kind as to follow that QR code and fill out that survey, that would be really great. And then that'll give Shati a couple of minutes to take a look at the questions that have popped up in the Q&A so far. And yeah, we'll get to the Q&A shortly. If you don't want to type out your questions, you can also raise your hand on the bottom little toolbar there, and we can let you talk and ask your question live if you'd like that as well. So yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I try to keep my presentation short so that we have time for discussion. As I mentioned, I'm really looking forward to this to have a conversation with the audience that took their time to come and listen to this webinar today, and what's their thought, what's their observation. So I don't know, Lydia, do you want me to go over the questions, or you would like to?
No, I'll let you go through the questions if you want to take a look at those and share your thoughts on those. And yeah, this is your show.
Sure.
I'm just hosting you, so go for it.
So I see there is the first question from Michelle Hubbard. Michelle, thank you very much for taking your time to come and see this presentation. Have you or your colleague looked at any impacts of shelter belts of trees that are naturally occurring on crop disease? If so, what have you or they found? Yes, we actually looked into canola. That's the only crop that we took some disease data, not other. And only a few years, because if it is a very dry year, we haven't seen much disease. And from the 2 years of data that we collected on canola field, we haven't actually seen any disease increase for the presence of shoulder belt. So the data that we found, there was no significant difference between the fields with shoulder belts and open field without any kind of trees. Next one. What is the format, Lydia? Is it, can the audience who posted the question, they can participate in a conversation, or I'll be just walking through the question?
We have it turned on so that people can raise their hands in the webinar here, and then if somebody does raise their hand to ask a question, we'll let them through and let them ask it.
Sounds good. So yeah, Michelle, if that answers your question, great. If you'd like to jump in, I'd appreciate that too. If not, I'll move into the next question. Great seminar. I was surprised by those estimates of carbon mitigation potential where agriculture suppressed all other sectors. I'd like to get more detail on those data. Perhaps the citation of the paper could be included on your slide. Sure, I would be happy to share the paper. It was a in-depth detailed work that we have done. If I remember correctly, close to 40 institutes worked all together, because there's quite a big sector, fourth sector we covered. It's called Natural Climate Solutions for Canada, that we published in 2022. You can just type the link, or I can also post it in my slide and give it to Lydia and her colleagues.
I think we have a question from Branimir here. We're going to let him through.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Branimir.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for wonderful presentation. And I really appreciate that you incorporate having semi-natural and natural areas within the agricultural landscapes, and talking about how the structure and the diversity of agricultural landscapes can bring us economic benefit, but also resilience in terms of biodiversity and in terms of climate change. My question is, you have been working with a lot of producers, a lot of groups, producer groups, indigenous groups, and probably governments as well. In your view, in your experience, what needs to be done to kind of combine all of those diverse values and perspectives and viewpoints to work together so we can develop policies and management practices that we move forward, because we do need transformative change to kind of transform our agricultural land into the land that will both support people and also support nature. How do you see us working together to move forward? Because right now we are very fractured. Everybody's pulling on their own way.
Thank you, Branimir. Great question. And you actually hit the heart of what we are missing here. We are working in fragments, but there is a need to bring it together. And one easy way, I would say the first thought came to my mind when you asked me that is what we're doing now. We need to talk more and in more platforms about what we are seeing and working together with the colleagues, bring the findings together, bring it to policy analysts, which in my program, as you know, that I try to talk to our policy colleagues as well. Unless we are talking, unless we are presenting this data, sometimes it doesn't ring the bell. So in whatever role we have, whether we are a landowner or producer or as a researcher, we need to communicate better, take every opportunity to talk to stakeholders, right holders, until it gets heard. And I think as we are seeing more and more climate vulnerability in the prairie, particularly, from my conversation with the respected landowners, I know quite a few of them are here too today. They are all concerned. They're all willing to look into approaches, look into the beneficial management practices that we can bring back. Some of us are getting concerned about, okay, I have big machineries and the trees are on my way when I am having a short window of harvest or seeding. So they are pushing those back. But instead of working against each other, I think we just need to sit more together, look into what the data is telling, and are we really saving time or money? Or in the long term, we are making the land more vulnerable. Because you work very closely with trees, Branimir, too. So you know that there is a reason we planted these trees in Saskatchewan or in the prairie back in 1930s and 40s when we could not grow crop anymore. That's when federal government started distributing free seedling to the farmer through farmer PFRA. So the question is like, are the needs for these trees are done? Are we technologically advanced yet that we don't need trees anymore? From my experience, my observation, the answer is no. We still have strong wind. In a summer day, many times when I'm driving across Saskatchewan, I had to reduce the speed to 50s or 60s because there's huge cloud dust that slows my fleet. So we are still vulnerable. We have extreme heat, and having those trees in the land are going to give some level of comfort and protection to those crops that we are growing. So yeah, my answer is getting long, so I'll cut it short. We need to talk more. We need to present more, and we need to try to communicate these results that we are finding to all sorts of colleagues.
Thank you, Shati. There's another question from Calvin in the chat here. Do you ever feel that a program will be developed to start planting field shelter belts again, just based on the need and the return that you demonstrated in your slides? So what are your thoughts on that, on a future
Calvin,
program?
I hope you are right. No one will be more happy than me, as even me both know the values that these trees bring. In my knowledge, I don't see there is anyone talking about that. I wish more and more people are raising this question, and who knows, it might get heard. So yeah, my answer is I don't know, but I feel strongly that we should have such program because trees are expensive. And when a tree costs like, the 1 foot tall seedlings, $30 to $50, and if it is 4 foot, like over $100, not many would be feeling the need to spend $1,000 to build a 5 kilometer long shelter belt. But what I feel is that trees provide way more protecting that land, right? It gives us um, storing all the carbon, gives us the oxygen. So it is a social benefit. That's my personal observation, that we all should give a hand to our landowners when they're putting their time and money and effort in planting those trees. So yeah, I really wish it comes back.
Thanks. That was a great answer. The next question that we had from the Q&A box, how do you see this research applying to the home gardener? And I guess I can add to that, like I live in the city, I have a smallish yard, but I guess would this research that you've been doing, is that scalable down to like to a quite small local size, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I see great value and relationship with the home gardens as well. Um, Myself and my husband personally, we love gardening, and we have a small, uh, beautiful garden in our backyard. I think the similar concept goes to our home garden too. If we are doing a home garden, we should not only grow potatoes and corns or tomatoes. Um, we should leave some areas set aside for native plants to attract those native bees. Because if there is no food, no home potential, they won't be visiting the garden. We should set aside um, some areas for where we are using mulch to protect the soil. We should not just pick out every weed, because and most of those weeds are actually edible stews, and it brings diversity. It brings the natural predators like those Kravitz ground beetle or wasp, more native bee population to bring the home garden productivity. And when we have a good balance of beneficial and harmful insects, we probably do not have to spray as much to grow our tomatoes. So I think whether it is a large agricultural field, whether it is a small organic farm field or a backyard, I think the message is similar. Let's look at this more integrated way. You know, not only growing one crop, let's bring back the rotation. Let's use crop diversification approach. Set aside some land for those, you know, natural friends who will bring lots of values. They are not in a competitive way, more on a complementary way.
Yeah, I think thank you for that. That's an awesome message, awesome response to that. Steve Wig, your turn.
Hello, hello.
Hello,
Uh,
Steve.
Hi there. I think I emailed you a few years ago. I work at Muskeg Lake. I'm part of the Living Labs project, Bridge to Land, Water, Sky. But as time goes, but this was such a great presentation. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and
Mhm.
um, yeah, I got lots of points I wrote
Thank
down.
you
But
for your time today coming to this presentation.
yeah, for sure. I was wondering if you've used electric fencing at all. Like, and I
Oh,
was
a
wondering
lot.
about, yeah, and to
Yeah.
protect the younger plantings, or
We, for our um, trees that we planted, you probably saw some of the slides that I presented.
yeah.
We used fans, like more like snow fans for those,
Yes.
because if we put electric fans, that is not going to restrict the rabbits or deer
Yeah.
browsing, which is suffering us a lot.
Yeah.
We actually had to go through different types of fencing depending on the which field we are working. Our friend Calvin is
Mhm.
here today, and he can attest to that. So depending on what field, we take that approach. For protecting field, mostly we went with fans, those snow fans, but
Okay.
we use electric fans for our other data collection, like for the wetland project, or the field boundary project, no, wetland project. We
Uh,
needed to block areas for biomass sample collection where we don't want the cows to graze. So yeah, so for
mm,
cows, we use electric fencing, not for trees.
mm. Okay. So then, well, yeah, and I think my initial contact to you was Buffalo Berry. Just have this vision of it. I spent some time in Africa and Kenya where they cut the acacia trees down and they would use that for their fencing and
A
uh
good idea. Yeah, they have lots
and
of
but
thorns.
buffalo berry for like yeah, paddocks, like I feel like it would be as good as any better than any barbed wire fence you could ever put up.
Oh yeah,
Um
no one will dare to go through them. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, but the buffalo berry also has I think less predators. Like I don't we have it in our food forest at Muskeg, and no, we don't protect it. We protect our apple trees, but and pears and plums, but we don't protect the buffleberry. And they seem, I don't think they've been chewed down.
They got browsed in our Indianet site. We have some established buffalo berry intercropping here, and those we see some damage from the deer. But now that the tree's grown, the damage
hmm
really don't kill the trees or make any
hmm
significant damage in terms of food production. Yeah.
They grow so fast too, don't they? Like, well, we transplanted the ones we have, but like they're the biggest trees we have. Um, but
You are right. That's one thing came surprising. Some of the pasture land that we started, no one would imagine that we'll have such a huge success in establishing those trees. We had more trouble in establishing native grass than the trees because we even did not water any trees that we planted in the cattle pasture that is absolutely dry and very
uh-huh.
gravelly. They
Wow.
they grew fantastic. I mean, there was some pictures that I showed. You saw that some of those grow even 5 feet tall, 5 to 6 feet in 2 years.
Wow. That's like a hybrid kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, they're like bar oak. Like everyone said, oak is very slow growing. I don't know, not the oaks that we planted. Yeah.
That's really, yeah, that's quite interesting. Huh. And then so we planted a eco buffer at Muskeg, and there's like 12 species. Most are native, but I was just curious if you have any input on like mixing in common hybrids with native plantings. Like we put some hybrid poplars in there, and those, of course, they people see them growing year by year quite a lot. And so, but I don't know if there's,
Well, I mean, that's an excellent question, Steve. Eco buffer, if you see that at AFC, we have some eco buffer design guide and ideas. We at AFC, yeah, we actually recommended putting some hybrid poplars down there too because they are fast growing, right?
hmm
So the initial years of establishment, some of those trees are excellent in putting together some growth in a fast way, and while the others are catching up. But depending on what's the density you're using to include those in the eco buffer, because at the end of the day, like after 5 or 10 years, you would like to see more a representative mix of the trees that you planted there. Again,
Yeah.
what is the intention of this eco buffer? Is it for nutrient runoff, or is it for wildlife corridor? Is it more of a habitat providing food and shelter for the wildlife? So depending on the intention, I think a mixed species is an excellent choice. And
hmm
as the year goes by, if hybrids are taking over, it's always easy to trim them, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes. Cool. Nice. Yeah. And I did
We'd be
wonder because
happy to come and see some of the tree projects that you are doing in Muscat Lake, and because I keep hearing from my friend Roland that he told me about this fruit tree project that you have down there.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, your invitations for sure open. And we're working on a land use plan, and I can say like I've been exposed to this like alternative regenerative agriculture for years, but to kind of translate it when people have only seen conventional, that's actually a big learning curve of the living labs is it's really difficult to talk about alternative approaches if people have never seen it in action. So
We
like
just
we
have to be
start
louder.
so we
We
kind of
just have to be a
started
chatty one. Yeah.
yeah, we started a little demonstration site this year and wish we'd done it earlier, but um yeah,
And I
gotta
think
get
we should probably try to organize annual like a field days to
yes.
bring stakeholder and right holders to show some of this site, because seeing is believing. Like when one of the neighbor is doing something great, like growing, for example, and in our living lab project, we are doing this crazy polycrop, like like some of our producers are putting like 20, 25 seed mix, which
Oh,
some
wow.
think that that's a crazy idea, but it works. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Calvin just spoke a few minutes before. His field is a great example. Like his soil is unbelievable. But if you
Mm-hmm.
see all his neighbors who are doing monocrop, they're all, brown dead, while he has a green ocean in the middle of the
Yeah.
field. So
Yeah.
yeah, no one would believe that if I take a picture. But seeing those in the middle of July, yeah, something is happening there, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. Well, we'll have to plan that. That's awesome. I have a million more things I could talk about, but yeah, I would love to get people like you and other connections from the bridge and the other living labs, like thinking of because First Nations are really an amazing potential to like
Oh, so much. I
go
learned so
where.
much from the elders in Carry the Cattle. We became
Hmm.
friends throughout the year. And uh, yeah, this partnership, learning from each other, doing it together. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, and the one beautiful thing is they automatically see more habitat as more food, whereas a farmer might see trees as less yield, which is less food. But if you're a hunter and a trapper, then more.
well, traditionally, I know that our indigenous colleagues valued this vegetation, whether it is, aspen, bluff, or any of the trees.
Hmm.
And it's an integrated part of the culture and wisdom and
Yes.
knowledge, right?
Yeah, very much. Yeah. One question about sea buckthorn. I have some native plant friends, many, and we're in a flyover zone, like migratory birds, and it is technically not native and can be considered invasive.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
can be. It suckers a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Of course, I'm tempted to plant it, but I'm also cautious to plant it. But,
Well, I mean, like any other thing, we need to manage, right? So, um, if you really have a use or interest in growing Sibakthon, they are excellent berries. They have, way more antioxidant than traditional blueberries that we all got excited about, or
Mhm.
loaded vitamin C. So it's not difficult. It takes like, once or twice in a year going down there, pruning them, mowing
Mhm.
surrounding. It's manageable, but it's not like those apple or plum trees where you plant and then you don't have to touch them for 5 years. Yeah, so
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's interesting.
Perfect. Thank you for your questions, Steve. That
thank
was
you.
that was a
Yep.
nice little discussion to listen in on. I think we'll wrap up the question and answer period now. But if any of you do have any further questions for Dr. Akhter, feel free to email the Bridge to Land, Water, Sky, and we will pass along your questions to her. Once again, thank you so much for everybody who attended today. Thank you so much again to Shathi for being here. Um, we will be sending out a recording of this presentation along with a short survey out to everybody who registered for this webinar after we're done here. So keep an eye out on your inbox for that. And again, if you have any questions for Shati or for anybody else at the Bridge to Land, Water, Sky, feel free to respond to that email and to get in touch with us. But yeah, thank you so very much, everybody, for attending. I hope you
Thank you
all have a
everyone for
really great rest
listening,
of your
and thank you,
day.
Lydia, for Bridge to the Land and Water Sky for this opportunity to come and talk to your audience.
Yeah, it was awesome. Really, really great. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye now.